Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you, yes, you, are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm AC. And today we have a very special guest. You know, we try to drop these guest stars in every 10 episodes. And probably one of the best bushcraft survival experts out there. So we're fanboys here. So please, everybody, welcome Joe Flowers.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm definitely not one of the best out there. You gotta meet some of these guys who live out in the desert in like geometros with just a teepee on top of their car. There's quite some amazing people out there who don't make the runs around the internet like I do. But
that sounds like those sound like homeless people. We were actually looking for a bushcrafter today. So, but you know, we're both very excited about this, Joe, because you know, bushcrafting and prepping kind of go hand in hand, and I think that there's a lot of just parallel tracks when it comes to prepping and bushcraft. So today, I mean, we really just kind of want to explore where those intersections are. Where can we kind of bridge the gap between the doomsday prepper and the bushcrafter, these unique bushcraft skills that probably are beneficial to, you know, people in the preparedness community and just in everyday life.
Yeah, we really wanted to just kind of pick your brain about, you know, these topics that we're not super familiar with, figure out what applies from one side to the other side and vice versa. And this is kind of that timeless, actionable intelligence that you really can't get without asking the questions. So if you're down for it, we came up with a whole bunch of questions for you that just kind of answer at your own peril, I guess.
then ask at your own peril.
All right. So, you know, let's just do the 5-minute, you know, like the Joe Flowers elevator pitch. Like, just if you can tell our listeners kind of about you, how you got started, and kind of what some background qualification stuff are in bushcraft.
Sure. So to start off with, I'm Joe Flowers. I design for about 7 or 8 different knife companies, including Condor Tool and Knife. Their parent company is Imacasa. They make 40,000 machetes a month. In El Salvador, I also work for an American company, Tops Knives, CJRB, Artisan, Work Tough, quite a few more coming up next year, including one that just came out, Shade Knives, and also Shade Indonesia and BPS. So just a bunch of outdoor knife companies that I design for. I write for a plethora of different magazines, a lot of which that aren't in print anymore, including like Backpacker Magazine and New Pioneer and Self-Reliance Illustrated, stuff like that. And I take martial arts because most bushcrafters do, black belt in Shotokan Karate. But if we start talking about martial arts, we'll be here for like a whole hour.
No, don't worry. We're not going to talk about that.
And I'm a zoology major a minor in entomology. So I really love bugs, creepy crawlies, and animals, reptiles and amphibians. And I own a company called Bushcraft Global, where I take clients around the world, mostly in Peru, Brazil, and Colombia, to hang out with indigenous tribesmen, like 5 different tribes, to learn how they live in the jungle and how they use their brain to make themselves more comfortable with the world around them. And
wow, that's
kind
really
of like
cool.
What bushcraft is.
Yeah,
is it's skill set and knowledge to make you more comfortable with the material that's around you. And there's a lot of really good segue into prepping from that aspect.
So you mentioned knives. We love knives. We're knife guys. But how does one get involved in designing knives and then getting a knife maker to like give a shit about that? Like, how does that happen?
It's tough, man. So like when I was in college, being a zoology major is not a very, very um, money making area. And so
Sure.
I wrote for a bunch of knife magazines and wrote for like Tactical Knives magazine, which I've been looking at ever since I was a kid, right? I'd
Yeah.
like, bike over to Barnes and Noble and like always look at these knives. And this company called Condor Tool and Knife was coming out with these machetes. And maybe I have a screw loose. That's definitely not maybe. But I've always been into
We all
machetes ever
do.
since I was a
Yeah.
kid from an agricultural and outdoors aspect.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
with that, became like, what do you do with such a big knife? I watched Crocodile Dundee way too much. And so I
That's
wrote
not a
about
knife.
knives. Yeah, and so Condor Tool and Knife at this show called Blade Show. It's like a
Hmm.
convention for knives. You know how you have prepper conventions? This one's
Oh,
like a massive
oh,
Eastern Blade
yeah, I'm
Show.
familiar. Blade Show. That's like the fucking Catalina wine mixer. Like
Yeah,
that
it's
is the
it's
one. Yeah.
massive, dude.
Yep. Yep.
Band-Aids everywhere. And I walked up to the machete company and I was like, "Why are you guys doing, this type of knife handle? Do this color." And they saw a big sale increase later and they started listening to me and I got better at designing, learning my skill set with that. And I got on Discovery Channel. That was not really that big of a deal, although people think it is. Nobody has Discovery anymore. But I went from one side of South America, in the middle on this one expedition called Expedition from Hell on Discovery Channel, which you can
I
see.
remember watching that.
And yeah, that you can see scenes from that when I was on there, and I got a bunch of knives in that, and people started listening after I started doing a lot more jungle stuff because I really love jungle. Um,
So no
being out in the
metallurgy
jungle.
work, right? You're not like a metal worker. You're an end
No,
user. Like you're the guy that hands on. You're like the way this feels in my hand. That's so along that one more knife question for me because
sure.
I love knives, but like bushcraft knives, they just look so boring, right? Like I'm
Yeah,
more of like, you're a tops guy, like the Tom Brown tracker, like that's a rad knife. But like just the
yeah,
typical, like, and I love Benchmade too, but I'm gonna pick on them a little bit, that just the Benchmade bushcrafter. It's just a very bland, kind of boring, drop pointy knife. Like what is better about the traditional bushcraft knife that we see instead of like that, that crazy serrated blade comes with a built-in toaster and all that kind
yeah.
of stuff? Like, why is that?
Well, just like a good pair of boots that you're trying to get for hiking and also rock climbing, there's a lot of specific things that you want certain knives to do. And in the world of bushcraft, we're processing wood a lot. And that means using it inside your hands for hours at a time. And when you have different sorts of jimping and all of these washing machine additions to your knife, it kind of messes up the ergonomics of the knife. So in some cases, a lot of times bushcraft knives are very boring with very, very plain edges, a point down the center line, a very distinct style edge called a Scandinavian edge,
Mm-hmm.
which we could talk about when we were talking about sharpening and stuff. But Scandinavian edges are really, really good for wood. So it's a lot of crafting, and so low on the cool Rambo appeal and more on
Yeah,
the ergonomics.
But that's why
got
you
it.
don't see a whole lot of bushcrafters using, a karambit to chop down a tree or something like that. It's just not the
Yeah,
right tool for the job.
exactly. And that, that's kind of where bushcraft comes in, because if you're just cutting a tree down with a karambit, I want to see it because that'd be hilarious. But that's like a curved knife internet. So it's like really hard to chop down a tree, but to figure out why you're doing such a task. And a lot of times with bushcraft, people get lost on doing the task instead of thinking about the context behind it. Because without context, a lot of these tasks just become arts and crafts, and people like lose it.
It sounds like the knife really that is the Fisher Price, my first bushcraft tool. That's where you
Yeah,
start, is the knife. So,
absolutely.
for people that aren't on the Gucci budget, what is do you have brands to stay away from? Is there something to look for in a knife? If I want to go buy my first bushcraft knife so I can start, watching your YouTube videos and learning how to play with wood in the backyard, is there a brand? Is there a type? What would you pay for a good Joe Flowers branded bushcraft knife? What am I
Yeah,
looking for?
I'll give you some recommendations that I've designed and then some that I just absolutely love from other companies too, because in the end, I'm still a knife lover as well.
Sure.
So if you want your best bushcraft blade under $50, that would be my Condor Pterosaur. It's a budget knife made out of 1095 high carbon steel. Why carbon? Because it's easy to use on a rock. You don't have to sit there for like 2 hours with your special sharpening kit to do it. So a high carbon steel is a lot of times what people want. And the Condor Pterosaur is a knife that even though I have $500 knives, I think it's around $40, guys.
Wow, that's awesome.
40 or $50, just depending on where you look. Has a lifetime warranty, and is really, really cool. Another knife company to check out is Mora. Mora has fantastic blades. Even though they're a quote unquote competitor, I still have like 30 or 40 of their knives. And a lot of people say, oh, you need a full hidden tang knife. Like guys, that's when the metal on the back goes all the way through. You
Hmm.
don't unless you're doing like one certain task. And some of the cheaper Moras are like maybe around $15,
Oh my
and you can
gosh.
buy them for just carving around, the RV or around your prepping site, or
Yeah.
just to learn how to do more with your hands.
That's a pretty low bar to entry. So
Yeah.
if we talk about, okay, that's the basic tool, then
Hmm.
tell us about like the basic skills. If I'm bushcraft dumb and I just say I want to start this, what are some of those skills that you would develop first? Where would you start? If I've got the knife now, I bought myself my $40 Joe Flowers branded knife. Where would I start?
Whether it's my knife or anybody else's knife, start cutting. And I know
Okay.
that sounds a little bit crazy, but
Mhm.
a lot of people say, well, the first thing you should do is start batoning and start making a fire. Honestly, the first thing that you should do is get comfortable with your knife. And that could be anything from making a hot dog poker for a campfire, all the way to making a feather stick for fire making too. But carving safely and looking up basic carving techniques so that you don't fatigue your hands is a great way to learn. And everybody always thinks when I get a bushcraft knife, the only thing I'm going to be processing is wood. And that's not true. You can start looking with that knife how to cut onions better, how to prep your deer better, well, don't cut fence wire or something, but how to actually use this tool in your hands. And with that, you start getting a better aspect for it. So just starting right away, whittling a point, because with a point, you can learn how to sharpen a pencil when your pencil sharpener doesn't work anymore. With the point, you can make a tent pole to hold your awning off the side of your bug out vehicle. With the points, you can kind of just get back to the point of having a knife is just to use it and start carving. And so just starting a very simple point for a very simple task. If you guys want something to wow everybody that's not super hard, look up L7. So, L, that's a uppercase L, lowercase 7. No,
Mhm.
just L7 trap. It's a very simple way of making a tent stake that you can also use to snare a large animal or catch a trout. And I've taught that L7 trap to kids that are 5 years old, and they pulled out big honking trout that I was really, really jealous over. Too it was a trout pond, guys. So the trout were kind of, very hungry. But to see the kids actually carve that, and for the 5-year-old, the kid just took a rock and made the notch. He didn't even
Wow.
use knife craft. So
This is more of like get comfortable with it, start on your whittling skills, maybe grab like the Boy Scout handbook for the wood carving merit badge and
yeah,
really start working on your dexterity, your flexibility with your fingers, your hand strength. That's where to start because those are your building blocks that you can always go forward from. Am I understanding that right?
yeah, absolutely. And the hand dexterity is a big deal too, because that's where a lot of problems happen when people get cut. Your hands get sore, afterwards, and it sometimes, like for instance, I'm getting ready to go to Trinidad in a week, and right now I'm carving every day just to get my hands back up, because I've got these designer hands that have been messing around on the keyboard too much, but I haven't been out, or they just got deer blood encrusted on them. They don't have any cool calluses, so I have to get like my wrists back into my summer hand mode.
So if we go past the knife a little bit, then I'll give you. Tell me if I'm totally stupid here. I have one of those. Is it called a Scotch auger or a settler's wrench?
Yes,
Y-
yes,
I use
absolutely.
those. It's fun. I mean, there's cool stuff you can kind of do with that in the bush. I think it's just a fun tool, but I don't know if that's something that's like in the bushcraft playbook. If you could, is there, besides the knife, are there two other tools that you would say, yeah, those go in the
Ooh,
kit? What are the other tools?
the big three.
What's the big
Um,
three?
all right, so the big three is a big knife, a small knife, and a chopping tool. Um, in the U.S., we say an axe, but that's because we come from Europe, and then when we came to the United States, we had all these wonderful, wonderful trees out there, and so every American thinks it's their God-given ability to use an axe, right? Because we're an
Absolutely.
axe culture. Of course, me, I'm machete crazy, so I want machetes, but a large chopping tool, because then you're able to process stuff for heat. The big knife will be able to process stuff for like food. So, for instance, big, large game, fish, anything like that. And then you'll have a small knife to be able to process, wood or anything else that you need to do. You talk to a Scandinavian, a Sami reindeer herder. The Sami reindeer herders from the Scandinavian regions. You ask
Hmm.
them what their bug out bag is, and they say a big knife, a small knife, and a reindeer, and that's all they need to survive.
So
And
it's all
so,
knives. You'd go all
yeah,
knives.
well,
Wow.
it's cutting tools, and with that is the parallels that come with prepping and all that too. For instance, a very, very easy one to figure out is we're trying to be prepared in case some kind of catastrophe happens. And we can get into the hurricane, which happened right in my area. I had to help everybody out on my cul-de-sac. I already saw damage today, all that stuff too. But how do people heat their houses? Or in their situation, how are they going to do that? Well, you have to have some bushcraft skills to do that. You have to have knowledge of wood. You have to have knowledge about what type of wood has the most BTUs out there. And then you have to have knowledge about how dry it is and how am I going to cut that tree down, whether it's with a large machete or a chainsaw. You have to have some knowledge of um, that tool that you're about to use. And when you're able to process all that, make the fire into a certain fire depending on the situation that you need, such as maybe needing a whole lot of coals or maybe needing a really, really hot fire for a signal fire at night, or a really, really long burning fire. So you put a lot of green wood on top. You have to have that knowledge. And that's kind of where bushcraft comes in. Everybody thinks, oh, I have this one knife and I'm going to go and try and find all these nails out in the wood. It's the knowledge that you have with the material around you that really helps you become a more rounded outdoorsman, more prepared person.
That's crazy because I was really thinking that we were going to come on here and talk about what are the tools, what are the skills, but you're telling us the bigger side of the triangle there is the knowledge.
It really is. I mean, with all of this too. I mean, this could work. There's a lot of crossovers. I think fire as the first one. If you're going to be doing all that, but then water, okay, I know how to get water and how to purify it and do all that. Well, now I need to use the knowledge that I've had on my expeditions to be able to move massive amounts of water to my neighbors, which I had to do. And of course, because we have to do that on some of the canoe expeditions and stuff too, I had like five different Reliance containers, but I had to tell them, hey, don't use your water, use this water. I went and sanitized and boiled it and did all that. But I had to have knowledge from being out in the backwoods and working in large groups, to go, okay, we're going to be in a situation here where we need to really work this water. And that's just a piece of knowledge. Everybody goes, hey, boil your water. And then they
Yeah.
stop. And they go, okay, well, I can boil water. Well, what happens after that? What happens when my wife needs to wash her hair? Oh, okay, well, I have the dirty water the almost boiled water over there, and then the water for the pasta, over here. And a lot of that to me at least comes with prepping too. You got to know which cans probably can last a little bit longer on the label in my cupboard downstairs. When to move your racks of water up and down and all that. It's knowledge, not just knowing that you are prepared.
So it kind of sounds like it's the bushcraft and the prepping are going to intersect at that point of adaptability and thinking one step ahead from where you are at a minimum, not just reactionary, that something
Yeah,
happens and now you have to react to it. Now you're actually having to plan and think ahead, and how are you going to adapt your skills to that given situation, which is kind of the Boy Scout motto, always be prepared.
yeah.
Or just, it's a game of chess, but you're playing chess against life.
Absolutely. And the cool part is whether you're prepping or you're bushcrafting or all of this stuff, those skills give you a lot more confidence in yourself if you're in a bad situation. And at least it did for me, like for instance during the hurricane and stuff.
Wow. So I wanted to talk about something kind of cool here. This is something
Sure.
people get into, but I read somewhere that you did some subject matter expert stuff with the 7th Special Forces group. And
Hmm.
it's funny, I've bumped into those guys a little bit in my line of work.
Oh, cool.
They're attached to Southcom. So I was actually in a mildly friendly nation once doing some training on the same platform as some of these 7th Special Forces guys. And it was kind of funny because I didn't think either one was supposed to be there. So they kind of looked at me and were like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "What are you doing here?" But just a really good group of guys. And obviously,
Yeah.
we're all about OPSEC. So we're not asking you to say anything you can't, but
Oh, sure, of
to
course.
both of our listeners. But no, what I'd like to know is what are the skills that the military would want a Joe Flowers to teach them?
Now that's a really, really cool comment. And it's kind of bittersweet because we were 2 weeks into the Russia conflict when that happened. So they were like really gung ho about doing this whole thing. And then they were like, Joe, call us back during the next presidency or something more or
They
less
had some
along
other
that.
stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah. But so this is a really cool question too. What's the difference between bushcraft and survival? They have been learning jungle survival all the time from this kind of 80s mentality of leaving, whereas bushcraft is showing you how to be more comfortable with the world around you out there. And down
Oh.
there, we show people how to make the green hell the green heaven. And so what they were interested in was like, how do you guys get along so well down there when everybody else is cussing about everything and people are coming back and all that stuff too? And it's like, well, we adapt to do how the indigenous do stuff. So they wanted to learn it, like for instance, about I'm not saying this right, acclimation.
Acclimation.
Acclimation. There's that
Got
word.
it.
Yeah, and they call me subject matter expert. Acclimation really quickly to hot weather, which is very hard to do without getting hyponatremia, because especially the military guys. No offense to anybody. My dad was a Marine in Vietnam and all that stuff too. But like, this is an American mentality.
Okay.
This isn't a military thing, because the Colombian Spec Ops guy who was there and the Brazilian Spec Ops guys were like, "Hey, everybody, show us your water bottles." And everybody held up these giant, like 2-gallon water bottles everywhere. He goes, "That's your problem. You guys drink way too much water, and you're not used to not having it." And it was like everybody had like a aha moment. And I had to tell them, yeah, this is our same problem. Everybody, even the wilderness first responders, end up reading the books that say drink water, and they chug so much
Of
that they get
course.
hyponatremia. So that was one thing that they wanted to learn about.
Wow.
The resources in the jungle, you don't have to use paracord if there's paracord growing on all the trees over there. And then, man, if you want to have, if you need to have glue, you go for that tree. If you want the tree that has the bark that tastes like chicken, you go after that tree. If you guys are hungry for, this, go after, this type of plant. And so they're interested in learning more of the living skills. And then the other thing is the eerie way the indigenous move, and how they're able to do it with like 12-foot blowguns, which is really eerie. How they're able to move around the jungle so freely without much equipment and all that stuff too. So that's, a lot of the things that they were interested in adopting later on too. That's not giving away too much knowledge because anybody wants to be comfortable when they go down the jungle.
No, that's amazing. I would have never thought that, but yeah, it makes sense because Chris and I reference the Army Field Manual a lot, and
Yeah.
Chris is a 9-year Army veteran, and so we both know the manual. And it's funny, you're right. It's all about escape and evasion. It's all about what's the bare minimum you can do to just get the hell out of there. But there's nothing about being comfortable. It's about surviving.
Yeah, and a lot of the manuals. I don't know if you can see in the background, but I have like a whole bushcraft library. I won't show you because it's all a very big mess right now. Because we're just going this summer. But like the USAF survival manual was hilarious, like back in the 80s, and it's still, I think, given out today and stuff too. So even at the Bushcraft Symposium in Canada and in England, there was talk about revamping a lot of the survival manuals because a lot of it is old knowledge that we kind of came out during that Rambo era, at least for me, kind of like dating myself. I was never in the military, by the way, but that style survival where wrap yourself in leaves to keep away from the enemy and all that. It's very different now because we've learned a lot more, and especially, God forbid, with the internet, there's a lot more cool stuff out there to learn.
And I'm assuming that with all of your tools, with your knives, there's got to be some sort of standard that you hold yourself to. And same goes for things like medical treatment when you're out in the bush. I mean, I guess this is kind of a two-part question. First off, with your knives, is there a specific standard of wood that they have to be able to cut through to make your list? I mean, obviously bamboo with a machete is going to be easier than with a pocket knife, but does it have to cut through hickory? Does it have to cut through pine? Does it have to cut through bamboo? Or is that all dependent on your location? And then how do you treat a major medical injury when you're out in the middle of green hell? Because there's not going to be some ambulance that just drives over all of these trees to come.
It's
and get
green
you.
heaven now, Chris. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
green
green
hell, Joe.
heaven.
It's we're living the dream now.
Yeah, and honestly, we have an app for like every cut there, but anyway, I'll get into that. So there is variation with wood and all that, and that's kind of like the next level of nerdism when you get into bushcraft. You go, oh man, those dudes racing on TV with those axes, the lumberjack racers, they have a very specific grind on that axe for that type of wood. Because it's a softer wood. I believe it's a spruce sometimes that they're cutting, or pine. So it's a much thinner edge than our normal axe. And of course, which one does the best, which one does that, that's kind of hard to get, because sometimes you will use a mora on, for instance, a piece of fat wood, which is this lighter knot, this resinous piece of pine that's at the inside of a tree when a lightning or something hits a pine tree, and then you see that, and it's really resinous, so it catches on fire. Man, that'll mess up an edge of a knife really, really quickly, because all of that pine resin is crystallized in there. So sometimes I might stop with my machete that's thinner, and because I'm Joe and I have my Jeep next to me, I'll go grab one of the other 50 machetes in there and grab a thicker one. Or I might use, something else like the back of my axe to knock it off rather than do that. So that comes with knowledge, though, of the trees and all that. Not saying that you have to have a special hickory cutting axe or a special axe for this, that, or the other. When you get to that level, you get to that level, but it's what you have on you in your kit at the time and the knowledge, and going, hey, this MagnaCut, this super steel knife, broke on this. I want to know what it broke on, how it broke, what the temperature was. Like, for instance, if you have pine knots and it's frozen out there, that'll break the best axe out there.
Wow.
So yeah, that's even written in Horace Kephart's book, Camping and Woodcraft.
So
Now,
you bring up a couple of good
Sure.
points real quick, and I don't want to. Chris did have a good question about the medicine stuff. We can circle back. I did want to. You mentioned a lot of books. Can you give us, if I said I want to get into
Absolutely.
this, give me three. What are the
I'll
three
give you
books?
the best one to start out with. It's called Bushcraft. Shocker. By Mors Kahansky. Mors, Mors Kahansky. It is the best book out there, bar none, because it covers everything: sawcraft, axecraft, knifecraft, knife sharpening, firecraft. It's a great small book. And ladies, if you're listening, great thing to buy your husbands, great thing to buy yourself, great thing to put on the toilet. It's great. Not in the toilet, next to the toilet.
Sure.
But Morris Gahansky was this amazing man, one of the godfathers of bushcrafts in North America. He had over 300,000 books at his house. An amazing, smart guy. I got to know him personally really well, but he really did a really good and quick job on the book. So, Bushcraft by Morris Kahansky. There's another book that just came out by Craig Caudell, and I believe it's How to Survive in the Wild. Forgive me, Craig, I can't remember the name, but Craig Caudell, Caudill, and actually, he might be a good guest for you guys to
Cool.
have on
Yeah,
later as well.
we maintain a blog on all this stuff, so we'll
Okay,
go back
cool.
and scrub all this. Anything you say, we'll put links and all that kind of stuff. So don't worry about that, as long as we can figure it out. But and I imagine that with the bushcraft book stuff, like you could
Mhm.
that's something you could buy now, and it's probably pretty timeless, right? It's not like I need to
Yeah.
go learn how to be a bushcrafter now because I'm not gonna have the internet when the world ends or something. Like, you could buy those books and read them at your leisure because that's timeless information, right?
Yeah, and guys, the Morris Kahansky's book is, each chapter is its own little chapter, and like, holy crap, I never thought about stepping on a saw and using it upright and just pumping the wood. Like, there's stuff that's mind blowing on there, and it's really simple but really smart,
That's awesome.
which I need.
That's awesome. Now, circle back to Chris had a great question
Medicine, yeah.
about medical stuff. Like, what happened? I mean, are you like, oh yeah, man, the sap of a southern yellow pine is good for curing arthritis or something, or what do you do when you have those? Obviously, I'm guessing you cut yourself a lot. I do.
Yes,
So
yeah, I'm a professional at cutting
yeah,
yourself.
and so and a first aid kit wasn't in your top three. So what do you do?
Yeah, that wasn't, and that's because that's not a tool. I always think I have one with me. And when I have my machetes with me, I always have a tourniquet. I've kind of went backwards and forwards. I got my wilderness first responder through SC, I believe, in 2018, and I need to re-up it. But I also have on my staff a wilderness EMT who's a retired in the Army as well. And he's really, really high up there with his medical awareness. And we have him on every trip, too. Each trip down in the green hell that we set up with clients, I have an evac set up, and we know how to bring somebody on a stretcher. We bring anti-venom out with us for the nasty snakes, and we take a lot of precautions. The most common cuts with an axe or a machete, everybody listening, are on the opposite side. So if I'm cutting with my right hand with the machete and I'm holding it, it would cut the top of my left knee. That's very common. My left foot or my left hand. So always look around before you cut. Make sure you're not going to hit a wire. Watch out for your dogs when you're around you. Tourniquets are fantastic because you don't need to use them just when you're bleeding out. Sometimes if you fillet yourself, and guys, it takes two people to cut themselves, experts and beginners. So when you fillet yourself, and there's a ton of blood coming out, you think, holy crap, this is a bad situation. Sometimes you can tourniquet yourself and then you don't have blood spouting out of the wound and you're able to go, oh, okay, it's just a flesh wound. We need to move that flap over. We've had cuts to where we've almost seen tendons and stuff. And then we've had tiny cuts that just would not stop bleeding. I've cut my extensor tendon on my left foot, but that was in college with a machete, and have been through the whole brunt of all that. So the biggest thing that we like to urge is tourniquets. If you can take a stop the bleed class, I highly recommend that, especially if you're a knife person or if you use chainsaws. Always have a tourniquet around you as well. Axes, chainsaws. It's just, guns, of course. I'm not going to get into that because everybody should know that. But
Sure.
that tourniquets are really, really important. For small cuts and all that, another big tip is tape adherent. That would be like skin tack, SKINTAC. So you can put that around like a cut, and then that Band-Aid will last for like 2 weeks because it'll really, really stick onto there.
And it's
And that,
different
and
than
even,
Dermabond, right? It's
yeah, it's
specific to
different than
hold a bandage
Dermabond.
on.
Exactly. It's a tape adherent. Dermabond's meant to close, a wound. And I do have Dermabond, vet Dermabond in my kit, but we hardly ever use it. The skin tack works really, really, really well. And if you guys want any sort of a book on how to take care of people when they're hiking and stuff, check out Fixing Your Feet. That's the third book I recommend for anybody just trying to have a basic library, because the book Fixing Your Feet, I think by Dr. Van Horf, I can't remember, Fixing Your Feet, teaches you how to tape for blisters on your feet, how to treat for blisters everywhere. That's where I learned about the skin adherent. I use it on my hands, even when I've shoveled snow. A lot of the different skill sets from that book, a lot of the stuff from that book you may see in a bug out scenario if somebody's not used to wearing their shoes, or not used to doing a lot of hiking, or just not used to doing some sort of repetitive hard labor task, which results in a blister. Which we get a lot on my bushcraft global trips because we're out in the jungle. I feel like I have a black belt and a blisters now because of that book, Fixing Your Feet.
Okay, let's talk about that. So if Joe Flowers says this is the pair of boots you need to run, what is it? Or are you like a barefoot type guy? I mean, like what are you?
I do both. And I do everything because I'm barefoot around the house most of the time. I like being barefoot in the jungle. I know that sounds crazy, but
It
after
does.
we do a lot of substrate vibration in camp, that means, not playing Snoop Dogg, but like actually like walking around. That drives a lot of the animals away. In camp, we take away all the thorns and all that stuff that's on the ground, and it becomes a little bit nicer to be in bare feet. Um, I do sometimes go monkey hunting with the tribesmen. They go monkey hunting. I get to join them, and they sometimes make me take off my boots because my feet are really tough. But you don't have to. You just have to be very careful where you step. I like pliable footing. So like the barefoot style stuff, Lems is a more like tough leather style, but I also love Crocs. Like I have 6 pairs of Crocs, guys, and I love Crocs, and I'm trying out some new boots, but more of the boots that I like, you think about jungle boots, and I love my
Right.
Ultimas, and I have
That's what I was
some
thinking. I was going
Danner.
to go Ultima. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love Danner, of course. The U.S. made Danner jungle
Mm-hmm.
boots are awesome.
I have a couple of pairs of Danners, yeah.
Oh, they're incredible, and you can get them resold. But when I go down south now, and whenever I go camping anywhere or to an event, I carry in my bag one of those rubber boots. You can even get them from Walmart now that don't have the steel shank. So the ones that are really pliable, because you can roll them up and throw them in your RV or your whatever you have, and they're super handy all the way up until it snows to the summertime when it rains really, really hard. So they're just a great all
That's kind of
around
that's
preparedness
your
boot.
3 season, huh? That'd be it.
Yeah,
Wow.
definitely.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask you, Joe, how many bugs have you eaten?
Oh, billions. Everybody's going to be making fun until the U.S. starts picking it up. So entomophagy is where you eat an insect for the
Uh-huh.
sustenance. 3 times more protein per gram than meat in some cases. And so, like, for instance, out in South America, there's a suru grub, a palm weevil. That's this big old grub that looks like something from Timon and Pumbaa that you just nom on, and the juice is everywhere. It actually is really, really good if you cook it. It tastes great with soy sauce. In the US, if you guys are at that point where you're wanting to try bugs, I highly recommend cooking them or frying them,
Sure.
putting them in
Yeah.
some sort of heat just to keep away from the parasites.
I've had fried grasshoppers before.
Yeah, I've had grasshoppers. I mean, I think that's pretty pedestrian for what you've been into. But like, yeah, if what are the bugs here in North America that you're like, yep, that's the one. I'd eat that.
So a lot of just like the suru grub that we have in South America, we kind of have sort of an old school cousin to it called the Bess beetle, Bess, that lives in a lot of hardwood trees like oak and hickory. And a lot of people have seen them. You kind of see them when you're splitting wood, and they kind of fall out, and they can make a little sound. And they have a cute little horn on top of their head, but their larvae is pretty good, and you should cook it. There, I said it. You should cook it. But I've eaten it without cooking it, and it tastes like almonds. And they're a large, healthy, big grub, roughly about an inch. And in the southeast, you can find them. You can find them along a lot of the places around the U.S. for sure, and even other countries as well.
Wow, that's amazing. I know. Yeah, like
And it's
Chris
going to
said.
be big too. I'm sure the guys doing like protein powder.
Yeah.
There's like protein powder crickets right now, and people might not think about this too for bugs. You know, I'm having a degree in entomology. I'm a beekeeper as well. Bees are an amazing thing to have as a prepping source, and I have quite a few rants on that. That
I'm
we
glad you
can
said that.
talk
I'm a beekeeper myself.
Oh,
I'm all
excellent.
about bees. I always say it's like, it's like the chickens are the gateway drug, and like bees are kind of that
Oh,
next step up, like
dude,
that's you're going
you
bees
know,
next.
with every the sad part is with the chicken people are pretty normal. Every single
Right.
beekeeper is absolutely nuts. How many hives do you have?
It kind of varies. I've gone from buying them to just capturing wild swarms, and
Oh, okay, cool.
Right now I've got two, and they've done a lot better. In my area of the world, we have really bad mite issues, and
Yeah,
and
us too right now.
I don't like to treat with some of the unnatural stuff, but
Hmm.
I kind of let them go, like I don't know what your theory is on bees. I feel like that a lot of beekeepers are very pro honey production, and I'm kind of like pro nature taking its course because I don't need that much honey. And
Hmm.
when you don't mess with them as much, like nature's pretty amazing as is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of on the crazy spectrum from that because I worked for the Department of Entomology in beekeeping for NC State for about 3-4 years, overseeing a ton of hives and doing the worst, absolute wrong stuff to them. And then a lot of them we just straight up neglected too. Then other ones, we knew how to I know how to artificially inseminate a queen bee, which nobody ever needs ever. But
No, that
that
does not
was
sound like knowledge that anybody
no,
needs.
but it was super cool at the time. But anyway, oversaw a whole bunch of hives, and the mite problems have gotten way worse now. Now,
Yeah.
right now, this year is the first year, uh, as far as 2 months ago, that I don't have bees because a bear just took out my bees. Got through the fence, and now I have to re-up and do a much better electric fence. Had to learn up here now that Uncle Sam doesn't pay for my bees. I only had like 4 hives, so they were destroyed. But I did the same mentality as you, where I tried not to treat them for a year, and that did pretty well. But they did have a lot more small hive beetle stuff. Anyway, guys, we could talk about bees forever. I'll try not to rant about that. Bees are important because you can eat them. You can eat the
Yep.
honey. Most people don't realize you can boil the bees, but you can use the honey as a trading commodity. And if you're like my wife, you know how to make it into mead. Then you have
Yeah.
an alcohol commodity from these bees that you're able to trade. And I mean, that's something you can trade for bullets.
And
That's something you
virtually
could.
no shelf life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mead is incredible. They still have like the honey, no shelf life, 2,000-year-old honey and Tutankhamun's
That's crazy.
That's
thing, and
our
they
next
still
goal
tried
is
it.
to take some of the honey that we've got, some of the raw honey, and turn it into mead.
Yeah.
And maybe throw in some raspberries or some orange peels or something like that just to give it a little bit extra kick. But that's on our list for, I think, this upcoming weekend.
That'd be fun.
Um,
Excellent.
Yeah.
We're going to be bottling our mead this weekend.
Joe, have you ever
Nice.
eaten, like I've watched, like, the shows like, Naked and Afraid and stuff like that. Have you ever encountered wild honeybees and taken honey without the
Oh, heck
proper?
yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, but I'm Oh, good. I kept it PC there. I'm completely stupid when it comes to bees because I used to do it 9 to 5, so I didn't give a crap about how often I get stung. I didn't like getting stung in the face.
Yeah.
And every once in a while I put on veils, but in like the 90-degree weather of North Carolina, it's just like playing paintball, where like after you play paintball for a while, you get used to it too. Now, not that being said, I would put on a head shield and all that too. So when I was down in South America with the Métis tribe, the Métis are very, very primitive. They were first contacted in the late 1970s, early 1980s. They tell you about the time before metal. They tell you about the time before clothes. Um, the main guys too. They're really, really cool. The ones that survived contact. Um, I was with one of them, and I hear the buzzing, and I'm looking around because we're the only two who notice it. And I do it because I got bees on my mind all the time. I'm looking up in the trees for what I thought was them pollinating something. And he says, "No, there's a hive here." And I'm like, "No way." And then he looks and points at this tiny little hole, and there's cute little pudgy bees down there. I was like, "Oh, there's a bee." And before I even like said, "Oh, there it is," they had tiny little hatchets. And this was a big tree, y'all. I don't know what that would be in diameter, like maybe a 1 foot, 2 foot tree in diameter, pretty big in North American terms. And they're going at it with these tiny hatchets for like an hour, y'all.
And the
Just to
bees were
knock
not
down
happy with that, I'm guessing, right?
no, but
Yeah.
this was a stingless bee. This was Apis. I can't remember scientific
There
name
are
right now.
honeybees that don't sting?
Yeah, there's
Why the fuck
quite
don't
a
I have
few.
those?
Because they don't have such a big honey production. Like the Apis cerana, some of these other bees do not put out the amount of honey that the
Interesting.
honey bee has.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different stingless bees out there. This was a much larger bodied bee. And so I'm thinking we're going to get a lot of honey out of this hollow. They took down this huge tree. Like, I mean, I know axes, guys. And I was still like, this was the coolest thing ever. And they go about it. We use one of the tins, and we only get like two little like beer bottles worth of honey, more or less. And that was it, out of this hive, because it wasn't like a honeybee hive. It was much different. It was this it's like this like dirty beehive with like honey pots everywhere instead of like straight up cells. And so we went there and we got all that. We brought it back to camp, and like we saved some for our mixed drinks that we were going to try and prepare and do some jungle like drinks with, and all that, with like some nectar from this plant and all this stuff. Meanwhile, the Matisse were like and they drank all theirs right up and were ready to go out again, and they just used it as a resource to go. And it was
Wow.
really wild because all the bees could do, they couldn't sting at all, but they would like get stuck in your hair and just like chomp away at your skull with their mandibles, and that's all they knew how to do. But it was kind of sad because unlike our bees, you can't reuse the hive. You just knock down the tree, you knock down all that stuff. That's
Sure.
their way of life. And they said those bees are quite common, so it was pretty cool to find them.
Wow. That's impressive.
There was there's been a couple of times now that I think about it, but it's always when they were going for stingless bees. When we found Apis mellifera, the honeybee, the European honeybee,
The Italian
down there,
or the Carnies.
yeah, they were Africanized down there. So when we
Okay.
got like, I was like, oh, I know these bees. I walk up, and within like 40 feet, I started getting tinged on the head, not stung, but the warning hit, and I was like, okay, these are not my mama's bees. And I turned around and walked back. So
what would you say are, with all of the experience and the skills that you have accumulated, obviously the entomology, the zoology, the going and hanging out with the Métis tribe, who's a late contact tribe, one of the most recent ones that we've ever made contact with, all of the special forces training and everything that you have done, what would you say are kind of the basic or more common misconceptions about bushcraft or prepping in general that you feel need to be kind of addressed or overcome before you even get into an activity?
well, a lot of times with prepping and with bushcraft, people need to figure out, why do you like doing this? Are you going to have fun doing this? Because if it's 90 degrees out and I need to go split wood, that's going to suck. Or if it's like, I have to go redo the filters on my reverse osmosis water, something or other. Sometimes that's going to suck. So the context behind it's kind of like the parallel with the misconceptions with bushcraft. A lot of times that can be with reality TV. Everybody's thinking naked and afraid out there,
Yeah.
and then they think, okay, well, I have a fire steel and a knife. I'm going to be just fine out there because I can make fire, and then I have a knife.
Yep.
Well, now what? After that, then what happens for the next 12 days? I mean, for prepping, the bushcraft parallels came for me during the hurricane. Just recently up here in Western North Carolina, you guys have seen all over the news.
Yeah.
None of that was really covered to the extent it was. And um, my bushcraft skills helped me figure out ways of doing pulleys to pull kayaks and dead cows out of the water. And my prepping skills, because I had that in my mindset, I had large containers for storage when I knew this storm was about to hit. That I was able to do because of my prepping skills. I was able to do this, not like doom and gloom, but I had that in the back of my mind where, hey, it's all right. I'm not just that neighbor out there who's just crazy, always splitting wood all the time. Although I
Yeah,
am
this was
that
real
crazy.
world. That's crazy.
Yeah. So
And
you
it
haven't.
is. It's what we're all prepping for is real world stuff.
And you've used it in exercise, obviously, a ton of times because you teach those exercises, but having to use it in an actual survival scenario with Hurricane Helene and everything that happened in the aftermath. I mean, to ask it bluntly,
Mm-hmm.
have you gotten that support from government agencies that has been promised over and over and over? And we get the news story that it's making progress and it's, we've got camps and we've got other resources that are coming. Have you actually seen any of that
No,
on the
no,
ground?
and honestly, Mother Nature, best teacher. One of my favorite things for bushcraft. I'm about to go get my ham license because, guys, Mister Joe of the Jungle bushcraft guy, I was out of reception here in this area for like a full day and a half, and I'm very, very used to that in other areas, especially
Sure.
on the river too. But for
Not at
being
home.
right here, yeah, my first thought was, how do we get to emergency services if one of my neighbors has a stroke? Because I have some very old neighbors on the street, and I was like, man, there's a big thing in my game. I wish I learned that, and we never saw FEMA or anybody like that down in our area. But I'm not right on the river where the damage was. There were a few FEMA centers in my small town and in the other town, and they are trying to help, but they were so busy and everything. I mean, as far as infrastructure being taxed, it took 7 days for some of my friends to get power back.
Wow.
And I have a generator connected to my house, so I was set the whole time. And you know, although it's a generator is a big beacon for all your neighbors to come over and ask to charge their
Yep.
phones.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
But that all blew my mind. And I was like, wow, I could see it all coming together. You know.
Yeah. So, Joe, I mean, and obviously, we probably need to have you back on because this is
Sure.
awesome. But tell us, if someone wants to learn more about this, if they want to go to bushcraft school, where can they find you? How can they do it? If someone says, I want to come to North Carolina and I want to take my shoes off and I want to go in Joe's backyard and I just want to, whittle tables all day, like where can they find you and what can they do?
Well, first they have to buy an auger bit, like the one that you described earlier.
Got it.
But the best thing to do is go on bushcraftglobal.com, which is a website I need to update again because I'm always outside. But if you really want a introduction into the world of bushcraft, preppers, this is really, really cool. GeorgiaBushcraft.com. Just
Okay.
because you're not in Georgia, we now have people flying from around the world to come to this event. I believe we had 3,000 people at the last event. And this starts everybody from how do I use a knife teaching kids to carve soap, all the way to, high level atlatl and archery throwing and slingshotting, which is really fun too. And it helps really get those skills into context. How to, like, for instance, I'm going to take a class at the next one on how to butcher a chicken. I don't know how to do that yet.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And that's just one hole in my game. Maybe at some point I'd like to be more prepared to have chickens. I know how to take a bird and like gut it and eat it, but it's not going to look pretty. It's got to
Yeah.
the way the Matisse
There's a
did
lot
it.
more parts you can
Yeah,
use.
yeah. There's a lot more ways of saving it, and so they have classes like that. So that would be like a prepper convention. Now there's bushcraft groups that are doing stuff too. So Georgia Bushcraft has a spring and a fall event, and I also teach with them and do some expeditions, such as their river expeditions as well. In North Carolina, I'll be at Mountain Readiness, mountainreadiness.com, which is a kind of coalition between survival, bushcraft, and self-reliance. Overland events, I'll be teaching at Overlander East. There's a lot of cool stuff. If you're thinking about having a bug out vehicle, think about overland vehicles, because a lot of the stuff can go there. I have to rig out my car to kind of be more or less disaster compliant, just because I have to go out and almost get stuck pulling deer out of ridiculous areas and things too. And I found myself using those same techniques to pull people's rigs and trash from the river. And I
Wow.
learned those from the overland event.
From the
And that's
Overland
like,
Expos.
You're
Yeah.
talking like
yeah,
a
from
windlass
recovery stuff.
an improvised winch and a windlass and stuff like that to
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Wow.
And
Okay.
how to like use your winch in austere situations.
Sure.
And like how to use a winch with to come along to pull someone out of a river and all that stuff. I mean, there's this really weird stuff that I never really had time to like take pictures of, but we were just doing it out there too. And it really, really like blows my mind how much it all comes together with preparedness, And I think honestly, if you ever want to just go back to thinking about if as a prepper, what do I need to learn in bushcraft? Just go back to fire, because no matter what, we might not always have propane.
Yeah.
And once you get those
That's a good
firecraft
point.
skills, then you'll have toolcraft, then you'll have woodcraft. You'll be able to learn from cooking on it, and you can kind of go backwards from that.
That's awesome. So we'll wrap it up, Joe. One thing I do want to say is, I
Sure.
have 3 of these. The
Oh,
Joe
awesome.
Flowers signature Grimm Workshop card here. The guys at Grimm, they've been awesome, and they're actually the ones that put us in touch with you. I couldn't say enough good things about these guys, and I
Yes,
think
Grimm's
you
awesome.
they're awesome. So we have 3 of your little signature bushcraft cards, and it looks like there's all kinds of great tools on here. And one that just came to mind as I'm looking at this is the splinter removal tool. I have
Yes.
to imagine that you have probably had about as many splinters as bugs you have eaten in your life, right?
Way, way more. I mean, my last name's Flowers, so like literally they come to me. But like, also another thing to recommend for your first aid kit is Splinter Out. Splinter Out.
I don't even
There are
know
these-
this product existed.
Yeah, I didn't either till I had to use it. And
Is
then
that like
one
a
of my
paste
friends.
that you put on it, and then when it hardens, you just pull that plug off and it pulls the splinter out?
No, but does that exist?
I've made it with baking soda and water, and you just
Okay,
kind of
I heard
mix
we
it up
might
and-
need to patent that.
I
It's
heard you
just
can
like
do
a
it with
special toothpick.
like an egg peel. You can do it like an egg peel does that, an egg pull. So you take the inside of an eggshell, and that pole
Makes
will
sense.
dry and
Yeah,
kinda
that
pull
makes
things
sense
out.
because the inside of an eggshell becomes a glue-based.
Right.
There's something that's called. I haven't tried that. These are small, little, sterile, like almost toothpick-looking rakes that work really well for spines and splinters and
Oh.
stingers and things that are stuck in there.
Okay. Awesome.
Very
Well,
nice.
so
But
like
yeah.
what I have the
Sorry,
Joe
rant.
Flowers the cards here. No, it's great. And I've got 3 of these. And what we want to do, we've had a lot of listeners just a lot of questions for Chris and I. And
Sure.
so we were talking about kind of doing a little Q&A episode, but now that you're here, I think this is even cooler. Is I think what we'd like to do in the next episode or 2 is, people email us in any questions for Chris or I or Joe Flowers. Joe, I'm sure you'd be nice enough to send us an email if we ask you some
Absolutely.
questions. We can read them on the air. So I think
Yes.
the best 3 questions that come out of this episode are the people we're going to send them a free Joe Flowers signature Grim Workshop card. So that'll be pretty
Excellent.
cool. Yeah, I think that'd be cool. And
Cool
that's
deal.
that really is the Fisher Price My First Bushcraft tool. There's all kinds of cool stuff on here. Blades and what's the you had a little scoop on here. What do you use that for?
That scoop you bend around on a pen, or a larger stick, and you can use it to kind of make a spoon or a large indent. The Matisse tribe likes to use it and break it off and use it for a scraper, for scraping the side of their bow to take off a very, very minuscule amount of wood to make it flex a certain way. There's a bunch of different ways of using it. It's just a scraper. Once you start scraping stuff, you go, oh, I need it for this. I need it for that.
Very nice. And don't forget, yes, you can send in your questions to stakeholderprepping@gmail.com. We will make sure that Joe gets them and can answer them. And the 3 best questions are going to be the ones that get those free cards sent to you. But don't forget, you can always go to grimworkshop.com. And if you use our code prepping, you actually get 10% off your entire order. So if you are looking at picking up one of these cards for kind of the budding bushcrafter in your group or your family, you can actually save money while doing so. And if this is something that you want to get into, Grim makes some seriously handy and life-saving stuff. So don't sleep on Grim Workshop. They really do know their stuff and make sure that you're getting quality for the money that you're spending with them. And
Yep.
Joe, you've designed stuff for Grim. You've obviously done stuff for a whole bunch of different companies. And I am truly impressed with the stuff that has your name on it.
Absolutely. No, this is
Appreciate
awesome.
it.
And we really appreciate this, Joe. And so yeah, we this has really been awesome for us, but anything that we've mentioned, anything Joe's mentioned, that's going to be in our blog. So if you go to stakeholderprepping.com, you'll see on our blog post, we will have links to all the stuff, all the books, all the very cool stuff that that Joe talked about. So yeah, Chris, if you don't have anything else, this has just been amazing to me. This has been great.
I agree. And Joe, do you have any questions for us?
No, where do I hit that subscribe button and find out about all this? What platforms?
Yeah, no, appreciate that. We do have our own website. If you go to stakeholderprepping.com, you can sign up for our newsletter. Every time we do a blog post, it'll push it out to your email address. And, that's got our Spotify link on it as well for the podcast. And then we maintain not a lot of social, but we do maintain a Facebook page. That's probably where we're most active. And then every single time we do an episode, we do a blog post on our website. And then all the discounts that we have that are specifically for our listeners, we've got a little section on there on the website. So yeah, we're pretty minimalistic when it comes to the tech stuff, just enough to get it out there. But all of our listeners, they've told us, we've actually got some really good feedback from people that said, I don't usually take notes during a podcast, but yours is the one because you're just dropping actionable intel, and we don't want people to crash their cars. So we just put all that stuff out there. They don't need to take notes while we're doing this. We'll drop it on the blog.
But yeah, if you listen to us on Spotify, we are also on Amazon Music and iTunes, as well as we do also have a YouTube channel now.
Oh, okay.
So that for some of the more technical stuff that requires a detailed explanation, like land navigation that we did in episode 15, we do have some instructional videos that we're including now as well.
Cool deal. You can find out about my stuff on the socials, Joe_flowers_Bushcraft Global on Instagram, Bushcraft Global on Facebook and YouTube. And if you just kind of Google Joe Flowers knife, you can find a whole bunch of stuff too.
Awesome. Well, I think that about wraps us up for this time. We will probably look forward to having you on again for another later
Love
episode.
to be back.
But until then, just remember, you are your own stakeholder.